Welcome to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. My guest today is Tom Jenkins, author of The Drunk Gambler with Erectile Dysfunction, searching for something more. So I think that tells you this conversation may get uncomfortable, but that's a very good thing. So welcome to you, Tom.
Thanks so much, Philip. Really looking forward to talking with you and seeing where we go with this.
So before we get into the drinking, the gambling, and everything else, perhaps tell us about what was the young Tom like? What was growing up like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a good background, in a good family, sort of, how somebody would, if you're talking about the ideal upbringing in inverted commas, I had all of that. Very fortunate environment. And, I was mostly a good kid, a timid, shy kid. But in the early years, did all right through school, got the grades you needed to get. I wasn't a superstar or anything like that. But just through the years, and I can never pinpoint exactly why or the moment, but at the same time, I never really liked school, never really connected with it. And, with other reasons, just began to sort of lose my self-worth, self-confidence through time. And, just was then kind of looking for things to hide behind and, ways to escape myself, I guess. In my early teenage years, began to develop and, slowly, progressively got worse through time as I made bad decisions that obviously made those feelings worse still.
So you're talking about kind of perhaps, entering into, times when you were distracted and trying to find other means to, I guess, to fulfill yourself. How did this start? What were the first things that you found yourself doing?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been. It was the age of 14 that I first got drunk, and I've always been more your sort of British style binge drinker rather than your alcoholic. I would be Monday to Thursday, I could happily not drink. If I was in my comfort zone, which was the size of a £1 coin, like if I was just at home, sat by the computer watching TV, I'd be fine. But when I went out, the second I was with new people, I was shy, I was timid, my self-confidence was already struggling. And, the first time I got drunk, as I say, was 14. We got, kids had no idea what we were doing. Really just drank whatever spirits we could get our hands on. And, it just continued and got worse and worse from there. Drinking more. Every time I went out, I'm that guy who ends up in the corner at the stage of blackout or worse. Throwing up, waking up on a street corner with no phone, no wallet, no keys, wondering how I ended up here. And, those decisions, obviously the self-confidence and the lack of self-worth is what's leading me there to be in an environment where I don't know people or that's outside my comfort zone, makes me drink and doesn't make me drink. It's still my choice. But then, you wake up in the morning and feel even worse and that self-confidence has gone even more. So the only way to, I guess, solve it again is to go back in and do the same cycle next time. And yeah, it just slowly got worse and worse. I mean, we can go into some specific stories, or I don't know where you want to take
well,
it.
Well, give us a specific story. Before you do that, I should just say, we have a lot of people around the world listening to this, especially in the US. This is not that uncommon in Britain for, teenagers to do this kind of binge drinking, unfortunately it's part of the culture. But it sounds like, Tom, you kind of took that to the next level. But go on, give us a story.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think it's in the first few pages of the book. It's, by this stage I was at university and I could go on for hundreds like this, but I was also gambling, similar, not every day, not every second, but, when I began, there was no stop switch. Anyway, I ended up with a friend at Cheltenham Horse Racing, which is a big horse racing and gambling event in the UK. We were drinking, lost money on every race. Ended up going out. I was meant to be staying with a friend of my friend. I didn't really know the person, where it was. we were kind of similar. He ended up in a strip club. I don't know what happened. I'm beyond controllable. All I know is I woke up in the University of Gloucester's halls of residence. I've never been there. I have no idea where it was. In a stairwell, having pissed myself, basically. And I'm being kicked, sort of friendly, not kicked like in a violent way, but kicked by someone being like, "What are you doing here? Get up and get out." They searched me before going out to make sure I hadn't robbed anything from there. I mean, they just assumed I was I don't know what they assumed. Not positive things, I assume. And yeah, on the way out, I realized again, this has happened many times. Didn't have my phone, wallet, keys. Didn't know where I was. Didn't know how to find my friend. Managed to get to Cheltenham city centre. It was a 45-minute walk. Managed to get in contact with my friend later. And I mean, that was it. And these stories can go on forever. It was winter. I was freezing, covered in urine, no money, no phone, no nothing, in a city I don't even know. So
Tom, this is pretty much out of control, isn't it? I mean, this is pretty extreme. Did you have alarm bells ringing? I mean, were you thinking, I need to, get a grip on this, I need some help? Or were you just still caught up in it, and, couldn't really break the cycle?
yeah, no, I knew I needed help. I knew I didn't want this. I knew I wasn't happy. I was really, by this stage, it was getting more and more extreme, the way I was taking it. And by this stage, I knew 100% I have to stop this. I have to change. But at the same time, there was still more I had to go through. I still had to arrive at a bigger low to actually get to the point to make that decision of no more. Like this has to change now. But from the first time I got drunk, I knew I didn't like it and I knew I didn't want it. But yeah.
Were you holding down a job? I mean, to the outside world, when you weren't, paralytic, did you appear, were you functioning in a job? Did you appear to be, so-called normal?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, people knew. I mean, it was kind of obvious, but at the same time, as I say, from Monday to Friday, I was sort of a shy, timid kid, sort of not too dissimilar to how we are now speaking. I mean, now I've gained that confidence that I never had, but it was really until through university, I was also working. Before university, I worked as a labourer on a building site. I got decent grades at school. Not the best. I just did the bare minimum to get by and sort of not get fired. And I had my days where I didn't turn up to work here or there, and made some terrible excuse and lie. I think people could probably know, but for the most part, yeah, I could hold things together because it was just those blowouts, and they just happened more and more frequently through time. The Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night.
So it's almost like it became part of your personality. Then it's, and did you feel it was compulsive behavior? Did you feel addicted?
Yeah, it was. I don't think I felt addicted in the sense that it wasn't like I had to do it, but I was so scared of being with myself and being like open and true and actually saying, I'm really struggling here. It was an escape. I'd say it was an escape for me more than an addiction.
And what was, what do you think you were trying to, find confidence for? What were you trying to escape, I guess? Or, what do you think it was that was driving you to do this? Why did you have that lack of confidence?
It's just, I mean, the snowball effect certainly played massively into it. When you begin to rely on alcohol or gambling or whatever it is, there were drugs involved here or there as well, mainly cocaine. Not massively compared to the drinking or gambling, but when you begin to rely on those and they become part of your environment going out, well, when you wake up in the morning and you've done some of the things that I've done, I've got drink driving, I've got not pay, after a drug-filled hostel in Brazil, trashing a room and leaving without paying. When you start to do those things, and even however bad a state you're in, you just know this isn't good, to put it in the most mild terms. That's clear. Every time something like that happens, you're really just sort of breaking who you are as a person apart in such a negative way that the confidence and self-worth goes further.
You're very open about all of this now, and in the title of your book, talks about erectile dysfunction. To talk about, is it having an impact in terms of sex? And I appreciate that's a topic that a lot of men would feel very uncomfortable talking about, which is why it's important, I guess, to hear people like you talking about their experiences. What was happening there.
Yeah, I mean, I was very late. As I say, through this self-confidence, drinking, the way I was living my life, I had zero sexual experiences or partners and I always forget the age. I think I put it in the book. I think it was 22, was my first sexual experience. I don't know how it happened because, again, I was drunk. And somehow I ended up with a 33-year-old Slovenian woman. And I ended up going back to her. I don't really know how these events happened, but at this point, I'm thinking, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, my sexual education, like many people, was through porn, and that's the worst sexual education I think anyone can have. And I knew that I didn't know. I was so scared. The drunkenness couldn't come over it, but I thought, well, I've got this opportunity. I need to get this monkey off my back now. It's sort of, becomes a badge of honor when you lose your virginity. And when you're the 22-year-old virgin still, it's just like, again, it's another little thing. It shouldn't do. It's normal for many people, but I let it just eat away at my confidence. Anyway, I got back to hers. It was as big a disaster as you can imagine. Nothing worked. I had to, at that stage, I just had to be honest. What else can you do? I mean, there's no shame in being honest after just being in that situation. And the worst part of it was I actually did manage to get the condom on. Anyway, afterwards, I left that place, walked down the road, and needed to urinate. Began to urinate down sort of a path somewhere. And I was looking down and nothing was coming out. And at that point, I realized the condom was still on, filling up with urine. So that was my failed first time. Again, all for the lack of I couldn't connect with people. I just didn't have the confidence or the self-worth, and the fear just went up, and that erectile dysfunction went on for a long time. As I said, I began to sort myself out not too long after that, but the erectile dysfunction stayed for a long time until eventually I gave in and turned to Cialis, a product similar to Viagra, until at another stage in my life, I finally really did begin to get to the root of the problem and overcome that. And with my current wife, things now work perfectly. I'm pleased to say, with no need for Cialis, Viagra, or whatever else. But yeah, it was all, the whole thing was interconnected. The drinking, gambling, sex. Yeah,
so it sounds like this was, I mean, how long did this go on for? Because it sounds like it wasn't a kind of big dramatic collapse. It was kind of years of it just continuing and, perhaps not being happy, I guess, with your lot. I mean, at what point, help us understand, at what point did you think, right, okay, enough is enough? Was there a tipping point? You're like, right, I have to do something now.
Yeah, it was after. So as I say, I was functional. I could work. I could leave things for a while. And more, I sort of 1 month staying on the rails, I guess. But I wasn't happy. It was like Friday night. I didn't want to go out because I knew where it'd end up. But I didn't want to stay in and be lonely on my own either. So anyway, I went to Brazil. I've always, I've traveled a bit. I've always been a big fan of Latin America. I went with a friend. And on the last night there, I touched on it earlier, 6 days in a hostel, super nice people. We hadn't paid our bill. We ended up in a favela. It's a Brazilian term for shanty town. Beautiful places full of incredible people. But behind that, there is, a small percentage of a dark underworld. Anyway, we went with a guy who knew a guy, ended up in sort of houses full of, gang houses, you could almost say. God knows how we ended up in this situation. It was 20 at this point. This was the first time I tried cocaine. Where else than in a Brazilian favela? Turns out, like all things, I couldn't get enough of it. I couldn't stop. We were with a couple of other people who had the sense to say, let's get back to our hostel now that was sort of in the main tourist area. We were drinking as well. I don't know what happened. I threw a load of stuff around our hostel room, sort of in a messed up rock star way, just with none of the glamour and all of the shame. Pissed a load of people off. Woke up in the morning with no real recollection other than I know I've done something really stupid here. So with my friend, he was similar, not as bad as me, but we were on a similar level. Packed our bags, snuck out the hostel without paying 6 days of the bill. And yeah, then a flight back to London, and 12 hours of that shame, that come down from drugs, drinking, whatever else we'd done in the 2 weeks. Plus, I'm now a thief. I'm not just, the drinking. And at that point, and from that point on, I just knew at that point, this has to stop. This has to change. And that was when the real decision was made. Now, there were many slip-ups along the way after there. But from that point, that really was the low. That when I went up again, sure, I fell, but never to that level. And I always got back up quicker. And little by little, from then on, the change began.
So how did you do this then? Because people listening to this may relate to elements of your story. I mean, yours is quite extreme in terms of your behaviours. But how did you go about trying to sort yourself out?
It was a weird story because, as again I talk in the book, this was the contradictions and the fortune of my life. So 3 days after this story in Brazil, I'm going to Africa and Malawi to volunteer for 3 weeks. So it's sort of like the guy who's just done all of this stuff and all these stories that I share is now going to Africa to go and help a charity in poverty and have the luck to be able to do that. Anyway, I was sitting in Nairobi airport, as you do, just feeling as low as I've ever felt and feeling like, who am I to go and help anyone? Just look at me, like I don't deserve this, and with good reason. And I looked up and there was a self-help book, and it was in 2009, 2010. I forget exactly. The industry wasn't so huge then. But at that stage, it was the first one I'd ever seen, and I bought it. And at that point, it sort of gave me some sort of guidebook to, it was like 100, it was the lessons by Robin Sharma, Life Lessons of a Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. It was like 100 life lessons of the basics of life, like eat well, exercise, say thank you, treat people well. But it's often those basics that we have to get back to. And that book, plus being 3 weeks in Malawi, where I wasn't with anyone, we weren't going out drinking or anything there. And as I say, when I was in those environments, I could keep myself together. The shyness, the self-confidence was still there, but it could kind of build on something. And I think with self-help books, and I think a lot of people do fall into this cycle of reading book after book after book and ending up with more questions than answers. And whilst I think it helped me massively in that moment, and it gave me that guide, it definitely didn't get to the root of the problem. And I think there was a lot more to it than that. But just having a little guidebook, plus 3 weeks in the middle of nowhere where I wasn't going to be drinking or gambling or anything, sort of gave me a little space to self-reflect. And from there, when I got back to the UK, it was sort of like trying little by little to build things back up and get open and get honest with people. But for two things, it's that decision. It's that I cannot go on like this, but with real conviction.
I was going to say, did you seek professional help at all?
No, I once went to a therapist. I think I went for 3 sessions, but I never really connected. I know many people who've met great therapists, and it's been amazing for them. Maybe I didn't give it a proper go, but I kind of knew deep down I could do it on my own. I never let the flame die to make that change. And I have a friend here who says that in Colombia now, where I am, who says healing is a decision. And for me, it really was that moment of no more, like with real conviction, I'm getting through this, and we with faith are getting through this. And that was the big one for me. And then after that, getting open and honest with friends around me who I was with about finally what I was going through, but more importantly, being open and honest with myself, like this can't go on.
And you talked about getting to the real, crux of the problem. What was that? How did you come to realize what that is? And then I guess try and find a way to work with that.
Yeah, so for me, there were many years afterwards. I'd say after this Brazil story, I fell back hundreds of times. I started working in London, good job in sales, earning very good money for like somebody just out of university. But again, I knew this wasn't for me. I've always been somebody searching for more. And my life was sort of work Monday to Friday, and I'd still be going out drinking and gambling maybe to a less level. And I realized again, the environment isn't helping me there. There were good people around me. I'm still close with some of the people, others less so. I had to change my environment. And to me, I just decided one day after 2 years of this London life, I had earned a bit of money, saved up enough, and I just basically booked a one-way flight back to Brazil. Seems strange given that was where the tipping point story also happened. But I knew I loved that culture and that environment, and it was a choice whether I went back to the drinking and the drugs, or I chose the right path. And from there, little by little, slowly went turning things round. Stopped drinking, stopped gambling. I moved from Brazil to Colombia. So it again seems strange because people associate Colombia, Pablo Escobar and narcos and drugs. But really, though the remains of that still are here, the country's really transformed. And I know so many people who have come to Colombia and turned their lives around and got clean. Anyway, here I met my first sort of girlfriend, and I was completely honest with her about my erectile problems, and we sort of dealt with it naturally, and things began to work. Through time, our sort of relationship drifted apart. By then, I was ready to move back to London. And again, I think when you don't replace the negative with the positive as well, though I was living a better life, though I began to have sort of more of the white picket fence, I still hadn't got to the root of the big problems addressing me. And when I ended up back in London, I fell back again into a lot of bad habits and bad vices. Again, never to the level as before. And I knew again I had to change my environment. I ended up back in Colombia after 2 or 3 years, working with an American outsourcing company here. And at that point, I was really feeling quite low again. Although I felt good, not drinking, not gambling, I still hadn't really fixed what was inside of me. I mean, at the end of the day, there was nothing to fix. Anyway, that's when I found out more about ayahuasca and psychedelics. So I'm happy to jump into that more if you'd like to hear more.
Yeah, so I'm assuming you then explored that area of medicine, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, 100%. So for me, I'd always associated ayahuasca as a drug, like many people do. My past history with drug wasn't positive, so I stayed away from it a long time. But the guy I was working with, I still work with today, known him since he was 18, had spoken super highly about the positive benefits of ayahuasca. I'd heard more and more about it through sort of famous sports stars and podcasts. And one day I was hiking in the mountains above Medellin, and I was with friends. Um, Beautiful sunny day. We had good food, good company, everything you could want. And I couldn't work out why I was so low and so tired and so demotivated. And when I got back from this hike, it just crossed my mind like, well, maybe I should just try this ayahuasca thing. It won't work, but go on. And I'm always quite an all or nothing guy, as you can work out by some of the stories. So 2 weeks later, I ended up getting in contact with 2 certified doctors in ancestral medicine. So, I never advocate at all. For me, these medicines need to be done. If they do call you, they're not for everyone. There are some people who can't do it. I'm not a doctor. I want to make that clear, but have to be done in supervised, controlled, responsible environments. And I found a really good place, well reviewed. I'm still very close with the people there today. And I didn't know what to expect, but I turned up to a 1 week long retreat. I mean, it's quite normal to do 1 week retreats with these things. And yeah, the first day I was super nervous, really scared because of my past history with drugs. And I sort of had quite an easy, soft, very light experience. I do not want to just give me the smallest possible amount. The second day I gained my confidence a little, and it sort of took me into this like weird evolutionary, it's so hard to describe with words, but I was like in my mum's womb again. And then I came out and sort of relived my childhood through my adolescence, but sort of looking at it from like a place of witnessing it again, but not judging it and coming to peace with that. And it was really difficult and really intense, but sort of going through that process that's so hard to explain, and sort of it allowed me to slowly forgive myself. And the more I went through the retreat, the deeper it got. And I had help, like it was really difficult. I had to ask Renato, the leader there, for help here or there, and they were there in a second to help with everything. And it was just a journey of forgiving myself, but looking at things from a completely new perspective. And it's not a magic pill. Renato will always say it doesn't matter if you drink ayahuasca and then go back to your life and just keep making the same mistakes where you've just wasted a week of your life in a retreat. And again, I don't want to sound like some kind of guru. The first line in my books, I'm not a guru. I still make hundreds of mistakes here or there and still can act very selfish and rude like anyone. But the time spent in those states, I began to change my diet, my exercise. I changed my job, moved to a more part-time, less stressful role. I was VP of marketing at this sales outsourcing company at the time. And through time, I found my wife. I actually met her at the retreat. And, I was determined never to rely on Cialis or Viagra again. After the breakup with that girlfriend, the first girlfriend I talked about, I just went for that for a few years. And little changes, little by little, it was, instead of the snowball effect down, it was the snowball effect up. In short.
And what do you think? So you had this, experience for many, many years of your life. You sound like you kind of fell into it, but it was driven by, a lack of confidence, and you were using alcohol and drugs to give yourself that confidence. Do you think, what do you think that's a kind of, is that common to a lot of men? Do you think it's to do with expectations around men or younger men, or do you think it's around, modern masculinity? Or do you think it was just you and just, that's something that you had a predilection to get involved with?
No, it's definitely. I don't believe it's just me. I mean, I looked at everyone around me, and maybe though they weren't so extreme, they were still in the same. I mean, I think you only need to walk down a high street in the UK at midnight on a Friday to see that, and that's fun. I don't want to knock it. It's people who go out and have a few drinks and have an amazing night. But there are so many people who don't. And I think it's a large enough number to know that maybe it's not the self-confidence, maybe they're hiding from something else. But I think a lot of men and women, but, I think we're more speaking to men here, are going through this, and they are hiding behind these substances. Or I think today it's changed a little for the younger generation. I think they're drinking less and less and less drugs. But I think one thing, at least in my personal opinion, just as bad technology and social media. I think a lot of people, instead of getting lost in that, are getting lost in Instagram and TikTok and video games and isolating them. At least if you're going out and drinking, however negative how I was doing it could be sometimes, at least you were with and connecting with other people on some level. And I think porn's a big one you could throw in there as well. It's something that's really not talked about, and the negatives that and isolation that can bring people are similar to social media as well. So it's a big reason why I wrote the book, why we're having this conversation. I'm sure why you're doing this podcast, because we know that so many people are going through so many of these things, maybe in a different way or a different level, but they still are.
So men listening to this who, relate, connect to your story. I mean, not everyone can go and do a ayahuasca retreat, but what would you say to them who are perhaps caught in these quite negative cycles, which are fun at the time, but are not? What, from your experience, what would you say to people listening, thinking, well, how do I escape this?
Yeah, it's just the $1 million question, and I think it's so different for different people, and it never has to be. There are a million different tools, and I think what works for you specifically is going to be what you feel inside yourself. For me, there really are two key things, and it's hard to get to the root of it, but it's that decision, it's that real commitment with faith. I'd said many times I'm not drinking anymore, and then next Friday night I'm in the same thing. But when I made that real decision and that real commitment, it's now no more. And make that commitment to yourself, and then it follows up from the second thing. Make that commitment to the friends you're with or the circle you're with. And if they're your partner, if they're the people they're meant to be, they're going to support you. And if they don't support you, there may be one or two who don't. Well, it's probably a sign that actually they're not the people you're meant to be with. So it's making that decision, getting open and honest with yourself, then the people around you. And after that, looking at your environment, and is it conducive to how you want to live going forwards. And then the fifth one is I slipped up many times. It's not necessary. I don't want to give people a free pass to slip up. Many people make that decision and never do. But many people do slip up. And if you do, it doesn't mean you're back to square one. You had a bad night. You had a weak moment. But you can say, forgive yourself, get back up. Ask for forgiveness from the people around you, and come back to that real commitment that you've made to yourself and your life to change again. And each time you can get back up quicker, and you'll be stronger for the experience of failing as well.
I guess what some of you touched on there, though, I guess one real challenge, and I know you said, you went back to Brazil, but when you're caught in that cycle, the company you keep are probably people who are very similar to yourself. You're probably in that environment that's creating or sustaining your behavior. So that's tricky, isn't it? I mean, how what do you do? Just dump all your friends and go and move to Brazil? I mean, it's not often as simple as that, is it? I mean, how do you have the resolve to still change, but when your contemporaries, when people around you are still doing the same, living the same lives?
Yeah, well, you see, as we've gone on quite extreme with things, but those changes, it can be those little things. I'm sure there are a few people listening who are in a relationship right now who know it's not quite right, or they're in a job and they know it's not for them. Now, I know, the most honourable thing a man can do is work to provide for their family. And, it's not so easy. You can't just just quit my job tomorrow. But it's those little changes and those little commitments. Well, if you see the group you're going to the pub with on a Friday night isn't in line with where you want to go, well, it's going to have to just be making those little tweaks to say, no, I'm not going to be going out on a Friday night anymore. I'm going to start looking for that other job. It's time to have that honest conversation with my partner that this relationship isn't right for me. It can be very little things that through time add up to a big difference. And we always, it's quick to jump to those negative things you have to change, but things that are positive as well. What are your passions? Because when I stopped drinking, I stopped gambling, and nowadays, these days, the time and the money I was putting into that, well, now I've got so much more time, money, and energy available to do the things I love. I love working out. I love hiking. I love gardening. I love permaculture. I just love planting and growing food. And now on a Saturday morning, instead of waking up with a massive hangover and feeling shame about what's happened before, I get up and I'm feeling great. I have a cup of tea and I go out in the garden, and it's again that positive snowball effect up. So begin to not look at what you're going to be missing out on, but all that time, money, and energy you're going to be gaining to start painting, start swimming, start hiking, start yoga. Whatever that is for you is now going to be available.
So finally then, Tom, what would you say to the 18-year-old Tom that has kind of starting to derail and, live the life you did? What would you want to say to them?
I want to say, go easy on yourself. Forgive yourself. You're not alone. I felt like I was alone. I think many men do. But you're not alone. And don't be so hard on yourself. Go easy. It's so easy to say now. But at the same time, I wouldn't change a thing. Not because I don't, I hurt other people and it doesn't feel good. But at the same time, it was my journey that I had to go through to get to where I am now. Now, I'd love it all to be sunshine and rainbows and everyone to have loved me for doing great things, but it had to be like that. But I just say, go easy, forgive yourself. You're not alone. You can get through this and trust yourself. You don't need to rely on substances. You can do this on your own.
That's good advice. Thank you, Tom. So you've written your book, The Drunk Gambler. And where do people go to find out more about that?
So you can, it's on Amazon. Just type in The Drunk Gambler with erectile dysfunction and it should appear right at the top. Or if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to answer any questions. Go to thedrunkgambler.com and there you'll also find all the info on the book and how to contact me if you'd like.
Well, thank you, Tom. Thanks for being so open about your experiences. And I'm sure many people will take away things that they can apply to their own lives. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for all the work you're doing with this podcast, helping other men go through whatever it is they're going through.
Thank you for listening to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. You can find Tom's book, The Drunk Gambler with Erectile Dysfunction, Searching for Something More, on Amazon and also through other online retailers. If you want to contact Tom, you can do on his website, www.thedrunkgambler.com. To help raise the profile of this podcast, it really helps if you can review it, follow the show, and please share it with your networks and people you think might benefit from listening. If you have a story you'd like to share, then do please contact me through the website mid-lifemen.com.